police are going through the same old song and dance with this latest slaughter that's taken place. Basically, there's not a whole lot that we could do except for mourn the deceased. Given how the white illegal system categorically lets white guys off the hook, we can only determine that the killer this time must have been mentally unstable to some extent. He didn't need to run from the cops. I mean, it's not like they were going to kill him. And any arrest would have predictably resulted in a plea deal to a misdemeanor and no prison time. God knows this guy had enough experience. I mean, with a rap sheet long as your arm, the guy's already on probation for several charges, including arson, to go along with his other crimes. All of them supposed to be freaking felonies. When you're white, there's always going to be the misdemeanor category for the exact same offenses that a black person would be charged with a felony. So, not sure why this guy decided to do this other than he may have been legitimately crazy. Oh, I put crazy in quotes. The children are dead. And while that's certainly no laughing matter, it's also not something that black people have any power to change. The white majority sees the same American carnage, as President Tangerine called it, yet they don't do anything about it. That phrase, American carnage, remember when old President Tangerine, Agent Orange himself, was telling everybody that the American carnage ends now, and instead it's kicked into high gear? Haven't seen him talking about American carnage recently, have you? And with the attention span of a fruit fly on crack, the American public isn't demanding anything. And the white media, who's one of Trump's partners in crime, or rather partners in white crime, they're not holding him to account for that either. President Tangerine and his ilk had big talk about Chicago. But when one gun slaughter after the next takes place on his watch, crickets. All this stuff is taking place in white enclave, all happening at the hands of white assailants. All of a sudden, President Tangerine ain't got nothing to say. He ain't rushing in front of the camera. No talk about sending in the National Guard. So that lets you know what his priority is. American carnage was not about Americans or carnage. It was about black people, and this was going to be his excuse, his entree to ramp up the police state against black folks. Well, someone should have told the moron it's too late. They've already got the cops already all over black folks. It's white folks who need to have the police all over. But then again, that would get in the way of white people's freedom. Mass slaughters in Las Vegas and Florida. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III has a lot to say about so-called black identity extremists. Well, it wasn't nothing about black people that killed these poor kids. It wasn't black folks who did that. Thomas Latanowicz ain't black. And yet these guys are running around shooting cops, killing children, slaughters going on a near weekly basis, none of them by black offenders, by the way, and yet for some strange reason we're not hearing anything about it. The Justice Department has nothing to say. President Tangerine's got nothing to say. And the white public has the nerve to ask why this continues to happen. White people can change all of this if they wanted to. Not merely because they're the ones who control the levers of policy, but because they're the ones committing these massacres. They've got 100% control over it. But there's a dirty little reality that the white majority dares not to discuss, especially not when gun crimes are concerned. Their paralysis, such as it is not so much a political one, at least not in the sense that they can't decide how to balance safety with gun ownership. Their reason that they have had this protracted entropy, this just long drawn out inability to do anything in response, is because this is about preserving the white legal immunity from law that allows them to carry out violence without consequence. This is part of one of the pillars that props up white supremacy. And it's one that has to extend to every white person in society. Because they are all deputized to some extent or another to uphold white supremacy. The system depends on the rank and file white person in the street to be a foot soldier for white supremacy. And that being the case, they've got to have a few perks with this. So there's got to be some stuff that they're allowed to do that other people, particularly black people, are not allowed to do. Carrying out violence without consequence, well, that's an important aspect of making sure that the rank and file white person on the street remains at the ready to carry out white supremacy bidding. This is what made mass lynchings of black people and the ethnic cleansing of black enclaves possible. The ability of white people to carry out violence without consequence. White supremacy requires the ability for white people to act outside of the letter of the law, but that can only happen when white people are emboldened to act outside the law. That means they have to be conditioned to do so. This type of social environment is only possible when white people clearly understand that the law doesn't apply to them. The key word there, however, is clearly. It must be obvious to white people that the law simply doesn't apply. White supremacy requires mass violence to be carried out on a routine basis against a target population. That's us. People have to be taught that the rules don't apply. White people have to be taught. And that lesson of white legal immunity is taught through experience. Trial and error. That's how people learn. Well, when white folks decide to try something outside the bounds of the law, what they find is there's no error at all. They're just allowed to get away with it. This Lindsay character was certainly allowed to do it. No wonder he had no problem blowing away children. He had been conditioned to believe that nothing that he did was ever wrong because he lives in a society that conditions white people to believe that nothing that they ever do is truly wrong. Everything is permitted. Everything goes. So everything went. This is why you hear me talk so much about the practical definition of things. There's a world of difference between what people say they want to do and then how they carry it out in practice. There's a world of difference between what is said and then what actually is done. Their system of values, that of the white majority, is not the same as ours. We as Africans used to place life at the top of our priorities, but we need to be honest. We have not done that in a damn long time. Life has not been at the top of our personal totem pole of values since forever. What we like to call ourselves thinking of as life, in reality, for us, it's actually personal well-being. As long as white supremacy isn't hurting us too much, and as long as we're allowed to goof off and kid around in between beatings and indiscriminate sudden killings, as long as we're able to get high, get turned up, or engage in rampant sex with strangers, then we're good. To us, this gutter level of existence, subsistence, actually, that's what we've been conditioned to think of as life. That's what we place at the highest level of our priorities. Ability for us to goof off, get turned up, and have children that we're not able to take care of. That's at the top of our totem pole. To us, that's life. And it matters everything to us. Even though we're not living this so-called life on our own terms, and we're not thriving, and worst of all, we're not in control of our lives or anything that happens to us. We're not sailing through life, we're floating aimlessly through life, and we need to face up to that. We've mastered the art of adapting to oppression by distracting ourselves, finding ways to numb the pain, when what we ought to be doing is eliminating the pain, minimizing the pain of white supremacy that we've been made to suffer. That's what's at the top of our value system. This is an intolerable weakness on our part that's going to destroy us. We don't purge it from the black body politic. That's part of why white supremacy controls so many black people so easily. They see this weakness on our part, and they make it clear that they'll threaten the thing that they know matters most to us. Black people are barely willing to fight for anything, and we are unwilling to die for anything. It seems paradoxical, but it's a fact that you simply cannot ensure group survival unless a critical mass of that group is also willing to die. If life means so much to you that you're not willing to die for it, if you don't have a standard of living that you're willing to die for, then what happens is there's going to be factors and forces that will reduce you to the level where life is barely worth living at all. Of course, you'll go on suffering like that because you just can't bear the thought of not being able to have some measure of whatever, no matter how ragged and pathetic it may be. It's an inescapable fact that Black people refuse to internalize that the only way we're going to put the demon of white supremacy back into the hell it came out of is if a sufficient number of us dies in that effort. Notice the wording. I didn't say if we're willing to die. First of all, willing isn't the same as doing. And secondly, we're already dying now. Problem is, at the moment, our deaths are not bringing us one step closer to ending white supremacy. So these deaths up to this point are for nothing. We don't need to be willing to die. We have to accept the fact that we're going to die. Our blood will be the price of killing white supremacy. Our deaths will be the price of ending white supremacy. We need to make our peace with that. Now, the bad guys, on the other hand, they have a value system too, but it's not life that's at the top of their personal totem pole. In fact, it's not even power, truth be told, that's at the top of their value system. The thing that matters most to them is their ability to oppress and harm us. That's at the top of their totem pole of values. Black denigration is their number one priority. It's what defines their existence. They measure the health of white supremacy not by how well white people are doing, how badly, how poorly black people are. Go back to the Great Depression, white people were ready to overthrow everything. Why? Not because of the fact that black people were not being reduced to a level of just pure hand-to-mouth existence. The problem for white folks was they were on the same level as black folks now. They had been brought down. That's the problem that they had with it. They didn't have a problem with the Great Depression just as long as it was still contained to black folks. But now that the Great Depression had touched home, all of a sudden something better be done. But the country was going to have a revolution. And that's how the white majority measures the health of themselves. Not by how well they're doing, not by how well their children are doing. Their personal prospects are largely irrelevant. They're looking at black folks. As long as black folks are down and out, all's right with the world. But if a Negro has two nickels to rub together, that is the end of everything. Oh, we're losing everything. What I'm saying is that we need to understand that priorities change. Okay, folks? I'm not saying that we ought to take on the white majority's value system. They're on self-destruct, and if we copy their example, we'll wind up in the same sorry shape. We'll go the exact same way that they do, extinct. But what I'm saying is our priorities are going to have to change to fit our circumstances. Priorities are supposed to be flexible. They're supposed to change when necessary because nothing stays the same. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again under all circumstances and expect successful results. You got to switch it up, mix and match in order to attain victory. Life should always be at the top of our totem pole of values, but we need to seriously take a look at how highly we rate longevity and personal comfort. There's some things that need to be switched around. This idea that be it ever so ragged, be it ever so pathetic, as long as we're alive, that's all that matters. We could be in excruciating pain, but we're alive, that's all that matters. That's to be reduced to the level of cockroach. And that's to also condemn your children to the same fate, because once the bad guys realize that putting the threat of death over your head is enough to keep you in line, and that you'll accept a pathetic level of living, then they've also made it where you will condemn your children to that. They won't have to do it. You'll do it to your own children. Better be scared of the white folks. Don't be looking them white men in the eye. Instead of telling your children that it is wrong that they not be able to look any white person in the eye. In fact, they should be able to get in a white person's face and let them know, I am a man, and you will not be able to deprive me either of my freedom or of the respect that I am due, because I'm willing to kill for my respect. You know, there was a song by T.I., what was it, ASAP, I think? One of the verses was, he goes, I don't know what you do for your respect, but I'm going to die for mine. I understand that one. The bad guys can endure the mass casualties that they're seeing. That's the reason why you don't see them up in arms. That's the reason why you don't see white people ready to have a revolution in the streets to stop these slaughters from taking place. Part of it is because they want to save face, sure. But a bigger part of it is they've made their peace with the idea that they can endure these frequent mass casualties, because that's not what matters most to them. Life is not the most important thing. Their group priorities are sick and demented, but you have to give them credit for one thing. They know what their priorities are, and they're fiercely dedicated to those priorities. It ain't just talk. They don't just pay lip service to it. They put actions behind their words. They put force behind their ideology. They're demented and sick and evil, but they're also clear as to what it is that they're sick and evil about, and what they expect to get out of their depravity and venality, and what it is that they're going to do to get what they want. They're clear about it. They have no confusion on the issue. They go ahead and get in front of the cameras and say something has to be done, but that's all part of the game. That for them is the coping mechanism. Oh, another white person went off his nut and decided to slaughter a bunch of children, white children. Oh, something must be done, but nothing too dramatic, nothing too forceful, because that will. Oh, you're talking about reining in white people? Whoa, let's not go overboard here. So that's the unspoken understanding that they all have, white liberals and white conservatives, whether it be white people in government or the white man on the street, whether it be the white man who commits a mass slaughter or the families of his victims or the victims themselves in many cases. They understand that there's a higher principle at stake. That is for white people to be able to continue to do whatever they want. Now, you can't start horning in on that, so you better find a solution that doesn't require you to actually rein in white people or to restrict them or to police them. If you want to stop all these mass slaughters going on, all you got to do is exactly what the police have done to black people, and that is go ahead and over-police white folks. If they decided to monitor and punish white people to the same extent that they over-punish and over-monitor black people, you could turn off these freaking mass shootings like a light switch. How many times do we have to see some white person who has a criminal record long as your arm, or like the case of that Nicholas Cruz character, you got freaking neighbors taking video of this guy outside with a pop gun. They're calling the cops and saying, you got to do something. Yeah, how many times do you have to keep seeing that over and over? You got to see video after video. People sitting here going, this guy's going to be the next mass shooter. They can sit there and spot him a mile away now. It's not even a matter of a joke anymore. They can spot the next mass killer before he even does it. And yet no one intervenes. Because if you intervene on one of them, then you got to do it against all of them. This is the mental and political tug of war that has made it where the white majority can't act. The problem is that in the back of their minds, they're thinking about us. Restrict their ability to carry out violence freely, and you've also undermined their ability to continue conditioning themselves to do the main thing brought about white supremacy and perpetuates. That is ability and the willingness to carry out just unrestrained, spontaneous violence against black people. To go after people who did nothing to you and be able to slaughter them without a pang of remorse sounds like these mass killers, doesn't it? And there's a reason why there's a certain portion of the population who these killers seem to spring from, because this part of the population has been conditioned to do this. These killers didn't just sprout out of the ground. They are part of a culture that created them, a culture that perpetuates them, that sustains them, that protects them, that nurtures them, and helps the next one to come along, and the next, and the next, and the next. You want to know why it is that there's no black mass killers running around out there, mass shooters and such? It's because society won't allow it. It's because we're not conditioned to that, and society wouldn't tolerate it. They wouldn't allow it. You got a couple of black gangbangers on the South Side not even doing mass killings. They're just making some noise with their pop guns. President Tangerine says we got to bring in the National Guard. Hey, what about white folks getting killed by the dozens by white men? Are we going to start racially profiling? Save white lives if you do that? No, well, why? We can't do that. But you can do it against black folks. And you can do it against the occasional Arab. Well, you know, the ones who come from countries that don't give enough money to the political parties. See, if you come from Saudi Arabia or something, they're not restricting your ability to enter the U.S. because you went ahead and paid the swag. You're paid up. So it's all good. On the other hand, if you come from Ethiopia, you come from Sudan, you come from Chad, well, we got to do something about you. When these people talk to one another, they may use the same words as black folks, but with them, these same words have entirely different meanings. Friedrich Nietzsche talked about that in his book, Beyond Good and Evil. He said that the same words, used among different ethnic groups can have entirely different meanings. Because the meanings of words are shaped by experience, group experience. and by group intent. I've told you in the past that whenever you say words like freedom, it doesn't mean the same thing as when white people say it. When you say freedom, you mean the ability to live your life without white people persecuting. But when white people say freedom, what they mean is their power. When they say freedom, it doesn't mean the same thing as when you say it. What you call freedom, white people understand to be their power. So when they say, I need my freedom, what they mean is I need my power. I'm not being allowed to exercise my freedom. I'm not being allowed to exercise my power. Whenever you talk about freedom, it's always personal, having to do with you. And it's internal. Usually your ability to smoke some weed or to be able to go to the movie theater without being harassed and such. When white people talk about freedom, it's external. It's not about what they do for themselves or in relation to themselves. They say freedom, it means in relation to what they do in their interactions with other people. When you say equality, they understand that to mean the end of their white racial guarantees and giveaways. So when you say equality and they say equality, for them, equality is a cute little empty word. It's a nice little notion, but it's not actually meant to be manifest. So when you say equality, they feel threatened. And then you wonder why it is that you can't see eye to eye on it. You're using the same words within time, but both of you have different definitions. They mean different things to you. So you see the conversations that they have even amongst themselves, even white people having their conversations in isolation. And by the way, when it comes time to talk about these mass shootings, have you ever noticed that these white media get-togethers, these little town halls, these little faux town halls, they're not really town halls at all. But whenever these white people have these little in-studio group chats, notice how black folks are not really the subject of the conversation in any way. You almost never see black people speaking at them. It's always white folks. And that makes sense. They are the ones carrying them out. They're the ones who have the ability to stop them. But understand, when they're talking about mass shootings, they ain't got a damn thing to do with you. Just remember that the next time some sawed-off white person who ain't got the sense that God gave a candle him tries to tell you that, oh, well, there are mass shootings in Chicago, there are mass shootings in D.C., you know, the media just won't call them mass shootings. Yeah, well, why is it whenever the media does talk about mass shootings, they never invite black folks to see it? And you never see the right wing doing it either. Right wing doesn't, whenever they have their little, let's make excuses for the NRA rallies is what they really do. Notice how they never bring black folks into consideration. So the conversation about mass shootings in the U.S., they ain't got a damn thing to do with black people. That's just with people on the right, the wrong people on the right. They just use that as a rhetorical dodge, a rhetorical shield. Let's try to change the subject, or at the very least, let's try to spread the blame around so we can hopefully point the finger at somebody else, even if only for a moment. Get the heat off of me, even if only for a moment. So you need to understand that when you try to talk to these people, there's a reason why the conversations seem to go nowhere. Because although you use the same words, the practical definitions of these words are completely different. Didn't Malcolm X teach you about that? He gave his frequent lectures about how you better use words that your enemy can understand. You got to speak a language that your enemy can understand. You come to him talking about peace and love. He doesn't understand that because peace means nothing to him. He values war. He's war conscious because he values conflict. Conflict matters more to him than peace. To him, peace is boredom. He gets restless. He doesn't like peace because his mentality is tuned to bloodshed. It's tuned to causing harm. It's attuned to suffering. Either someone else, preferably someone else's, but you know, as far as he's concerned, long as there's some fight going on, that helps to make things more lively. Okay, all of this sitting around and people, you know, playing lutes, people sitting here, they're singing songs and peacefully interacting. Oh, that had to come to an end. We need some action around here. So you come to him talking about peace, love, and integration, and as far as he's concerned, he ain't trying to hear all that. And when you come to him talking about the necessity to enforce the law against everyone, what he hears is you're going to get in the way of my power. And the first power is the ability to take lives, preferably with no consequences. So that's the reason why it will not be long at all before we hear about yet another white man who goes on yet another shooting spree, who takes the lives of a bunch of innocents. And the same old song and dance will take place. The white authorities that be will put the suffering victims, survivors in front of the cameras, and people will go, oh, why did this happen? Well, we know full well why it happens. This is the cost of white immunity from law. You get total lawlessness when people are not restrained, when a certain group is conditioned to believe that everything that they do is right. They're never questioned, never punished, never told no, never restrained, never criticized. And everything that they do always has a ready phalanx of excuse makers willing to justify it and rationalize and excuse it away. When that is what they're conditioned to do, then what you are doing is you are encouraging and you are promoting sociopathology. And that's what's happening here. You got these guys who have been caught in crime after crime after crime before they commit the big one. They get caught over and over and over again. A black man doesn't even have to commit a crime. Merely being accused, that's it. You're good as guilty. And ain't going to be no letting you get away with it 120 times before they lock you up. Once is enough. If you're white, on the other hand, well, we got to wait until he does something. What does that mean? Well, he shoots a cop or he shoots a bunch of innocent white people. But anybody else? Anything else? Any other circumstances? Nah. So that's the reason why it will not be long at all before I have to report to you about yet another sad example in the ongoing self-inflicted genocide of white on white crime. And on a side note, I told you guys how pretty much everything is white genocide for the sawed-off clowns. Well, ever notice how mass shootings of white people by white people, how that never seems to make the list of white genocide? That never gets construed as white genocide. Whenever they talk about black stormtroopers in a Star Wars movie, or they talk. Slaughtering each other by the dozen, slaughtering white children. These kids were killed. These were white kids who were killed. That's not white genocide. Just thought I'd throw that. I know that this is a little late in coming, but I wanted to make sure that I composed my thoughts properly. At one race in California that I was concerned about, and that was the recall election of one Superior Court Judge, Aaron Persky. He was the guy who became famous because he decided that Brock Turner should only get the minimum sentence, 6 months for sexual assault. And what it actually equated to was only 2 months in jail because he got out with good behavior. Good behavior for a guy who committed sexual assault, admitted to. And this made people angry for a lot of reasons, justifiably. It's yet another case, and I've given you a ton of them on my channels, my White on White Crime series, which I'm sure someone has re-uploaded on YouTube, hopefully, has recounted how over and over again, white men, not even rich white, people keep pointing to Brock Turner and say, well, he only got off the rich. No, I pointed out plenty of other cases of poor white men, homeless, who still got away with rape, got away with sexual assault, got away with child molestation simply because they're white. And it makes sense that Aaron Persky thought that Brock Turner ought to get away with it. Besides, Aaron Persky himself, while it is true that he, just like Brock Turner, Aaron Persky is a former Stanford graduate, and like Brock Turner, he was an athlete when he was there. So sure, the lines of commonality are there. But we all know that that's not why he let Brock Turner off the hook. Because there's been plenty of
for who he did let off the hook. He decided that he was going to try to hide behind the state parole board's recommendation for a sentence. And judges are just like movie critics in this regard. They only take other people's suggestions into consideration. The only time that a judge ever quotes the recommendation from another source is if it's something that they themselves personally agree with. It's like a movie critic. Movie critics only cite the opinion of audiences when they themselves personally agree with what the audiences say. The rest of the time, the audiences are just a bunch of ignorant rubes who don't know any better. And how ironic, when it comes time to talk about Judge Aaron Persky's defenders, once it was obvious he was going to be voted out of office, his defenders have the exact same attitude. All of a sudden, the so-called voter base, who the jury pools come from, well, they're just a bunch of ignorant rubes. They don't know anything. They're totally uninformed. You'll be hearing that phrase more later on. But Aaron Persky has been voted out of office. He's been successfully recalled. First time since the 1930s that this has occurred. And when it came time for the recall to be announced, Aaron Persky decided that he wasn't going to actually make the case to the voters. He realized that he had lost that one a long time ago. He could not defend his actions. His actions were indefensible. So what did Aaron Persky do? He decided that he was going to go to a judge. He decided, well, I'm going to file a lawsuit and try to get this recall election thrown out. Well, aren't you going to make your case to the voters so that they can understand it? No, forget about it. Who cares what the voters say? It's my job and I should have it no matter what. This scared a lot of people in power because they understand something that a lot of the laymen, a lot of the public doesn't understand. And that is the people who are in the courts, they are there to give predictable sentences. What happened to Brock Turner was not a perversion of justice. It was the system working exactly the way it's supposed to, exactly the way that it's designed. How many times have you seen a judge thrown off the bench by his peers? Have you ever seen the state bar decide we're going to move to get this judge off the bench? You ever see members of the legal community say we're going to get this judge off the bench? They don't. If the people don't do it, it never happens. So much for so-called judicial independence. What they really mean is judicial immunity from scrutiny. That's what they really mean. And there have been a lot of slow coasts out there, people who ain't got the sense that God gave a cantaloupe, a half-eaten cantaloupe, who have been calling themselves saying, well, I done heard some folks say that if the judge can't make an unpopular decision, that somehow more black folks gonna go to jail. Let me tell you something. The so-called judicial independence that these judges have had, that's been the main reason they've been sending black folks to jail. Because the law says that you should only have somebody in jail for a small amount of time. The judges say, oh, to hell with that. We're going to lock them up 25 to life. So much for judicial independence being a way for judges to give lighter sentences to defendants who may deserve it. No black person has ever benefited from these judges and their current status quo of judicial independence. No black person's benefited from that. When judges decide that they're going to hand down an unpopular ruling, it's always an unpopular ruling that helps a white person. It's always some white guy who should have had the courthouse dropped on him, some white guy who should have had the book thrown at him, and yet he gets a slap on the wrist if not time served. So you can go ahead and be dumb enough to fall for that con job if you want. The only thing that you prove to me is that your IQ is about as high as your shoe size. I'm glad to see what's happened to Persky. This is exactly what we need more of, a lot more of. You need this in a local judicial district near you. The fire that we started has now begun to spread, I would hope. The voters threw out Anita Alvarez in Chicago for her blatant racist scoffing at the law. Tim McGinty in Cleveland was sent packing. Angela Corey in Florida. Dale Cox in Louisiana. Racist DAs, the prosecutors who clearly were throwing cases, they were made to answer to the voters. And the punishment was, you're done. Okay, they didn't go to prison, but very least they're no longer in office. And by the way, you notice how you never see the lawyers ever cheering these types of developments when the people speak in one loud voice and say, we're getting rid of so-and-so prosecutor because of the way that they handled this case. Notice how you never see the lawyers ever standing up and saying, you know what, this is good. The lawyers never seem to be fine with that. The American injustice system is racist and it's evil and it's demented because it's white supremacy codified into rules. But the only ones who seem to have a problem with that is the public, at least some of us. When it came time for Aaron Persky to finally face the music, It was the people who had to hold that bastard's feet to the fire. Michelle Dobbin, the one woman who led the recall, she quoted Jeffrey Toobin, that sad sack who you see on CNN. And she quoted him as having said that recalls don't work because the public becomes tired and moves on. She quoted him as saying that on Twitter. And then she said, gee, hope he has me on the show soon. I don't know if he did. I would like to see if Jeffrey Toobin answered to Michelle Dobbin for that. But the thing is, we know who Jeffrey Toobin is and what he is. He is actually taunting the public by telling us that he knows the public can't stay focused on anything very long. Keep in mind, Jeffrey Toobin, he's the guy who is, every time you look up, he's always taking shots at black folks, always defending the murders of black people. And he throws around phrases like the race card all the time. So you know where he's coming from. And he sounds just like one Ladoris Cordell, doesn't he? For those of you who don't know, the last week or so, there's been one person who the white media couldn't help but put out front because they need to make sure there's a black face defending the effery. So the Negro who they went to, their crash dummy of choice, was one Ladoris Cordell. And she, too, is a former Superior Court judge, just like Eric Persky. Well, I'm sure that she's completely and thoroughly objective. I'm sure that she's not biased at all. You see, Jeffrey Toobin, Ladoris Cordell, and the rest of these scumbags, they're part of the law degree mafia. So you can bet that Toobin, just like Cordell, he was opposed to the recall. He sat there and said, well, I actually think that old boy should be recalled. Sure you do. No, he didn't believe that at all. What he was saying was what he felt he had to say in order to seem like he wasn't totally in the tank. Because you're talking out of both sides of your neck when in one breath you say, well, I'm not opposed to the recall. And then in the next breath you say, but recalls don't work. Recalls don't work. Okay, sure. That's not a lament on his part. That is a law degree wielding shyster who was bragging that his fellow courtroom crooks don't have to worry about being held to account or being punished for their actions because they can always wait out the public's outrage. He was trying to make the case for the normalization of people just getting screwed in court and judges acting outside of the law, because that's what Eric Persky did. He acted outside of the law. He knew exactly what a sentence was supposed to be. And he decided that for a white man, the law has to be put on ice for a while. The law is suspended when a white defendant is in the courtroom. Guys like Persky, Cordell, and Toobin, they depend on the public having short memories or being too busy to be able to give their full attention to the people who need to be punished. Persistence takes focus, but focus takes time, and time is at a premium for most people in the society, except for law.
Well, he wasn't in favor of it either. That tells you everything you need to know. You ever see these guys cheering whenever a crooked judge or DA goes down? I mean, you would think to hear them tell it that they would love seeing the legal profession being cleaned up and that it would make them happy, but it doesn't. It never does. Instead, it makes them to feel threatened. And when you consider that so many of America's so-called journalists, the people who you get your news and information from, are lawyers themselves, Chris Cuomo, Megyn Kelly, to name a few, you understand why the white media is not cheering these developments either. You notice that what they're saying instead is that basically the public just acting out of emotion. Is this how the law is going to whatever? There's an old joke about lawyers, which everyone is familiar with. What do you call a dozen lawyers chained to the bottom of the ocean? Punchline, a good start. That's exactly how I feel about the recall of Persky. And before I go any farther, I need to go ahead and point out that Michelle Dobbin didn't do this for the sake of black people. There were no black people involved in this entire escapade. The victim, whose face has not been shown, but we know she's a white woman. She went to Stanford, so it's a better than 95% chance she's white. And all these white women out here, these so-called feminists out here, who are willing to go to the mat for, they don't do that for black women. So let's be honest here. Ain't no black folks involved. So that's why Michelle Dobbin was out there. Brock Turner's victim was the right color. If Brock Turner's victim had been black, well, it would have been, the system ain't perfect. Well, maybe we need some better laws, or, well, the judge needs to explain this. In other words, white explain it. Michelle Dobbin wouldn't have been doing this for a black woman. Black women need to understand that. These white women ain't going to the mat for you. Daniel Holtzclaw, you don't see any white women out there saying that Daniel Holtzclaw needs to stay in prison. You can find white women, however, who are saying that he was wrongfully convicted and needs to be let go. You can find plenty of white women willing to say that. So I say that simply make the point that I am not at all fooled that Michelle Dobbin was doing this for the sake of any sort of judicial equality or any sort of equal justice under the law. She wasn't doing this for the sake of balancing the scale. She was doing it because she personally objected to a woman being a target of sexual assault, and she wanted to make sure that this white woman was actually avenged because she understood that if Brock Turner could get away with this, this makes every woman, herself included, every white woman anyway, to a target. Black women, you're on your own. But the defenders of Judge Persky, many of them women, by the way, very interesting, part of the law degree mafia, they've decided that they were going to try to use some pathetic talking points meant to shame the public, attack the public, assail the public. At no point did they try to make the case for why it's okay for a sexual offender to be out on the streets and why it is that the judge didn't throw the book at him. The judge could have given Brock Turner a harsher sentence. Instead, what happened was he gave explanations that sounded like he was part of the defense team. He let you know exactly where, Persky let you know exactly where he was coming from. Because as far as he was concerned, hey, nobody's been recalled in California. No judge has been recalled in California in 80 years. So what that means is the chances of me getting recalled are practically none. The public will be up in arms. But when are they not up in arms? They're a bunch of ignorant sheep. We've been getting over on these scumbags for decades. We've been knocking the public dead for years. Yeah. It'll be a tempest in the teapot. They'll get a little angry. They'll have some demonstrations, and then they'll move on to the next episode of Survivor. But it didn't happen this time. This time, thanks to Michelle Dobbin, the public stayed on point. They stayed focused. They didn't forget, and they were determined to punish Aaron Persky, and now they have. Got to give the white folks credit, the ones who actually get on point about getting some payback. They stay on it. They don't forget about it. They make a daily crusade out of it. They don't allow their friends and families to forget about it. They stay on it. They're freaking vigilant. And now the people who tried and failed to defend a corrupt judge, all of a sudden we're hearing a phrase, judicial independence. Where were these legal worrywarts at when Judge Olu Stevens in Oklahoma has faced racial persecution simply for demanding that DAs and police finally adhere to the law, demanding that the juries actually look like the people who are on trial, that if a black defendant comes in his courtroom, you can't have an all-white jury? Where are these white legal eagles who were talking about judicial independence last week? Where the hell were they at for Olu Stevens? Where was LaDoris Cordell at? She was completely silent. Oh, she's a judicial activist for judicial equality. Yeah, but not when it comes to black people. She's part of the law mafia. She's part of the law degree mafia. She was a judge, so we understand that as far as she was concerned, she thinks she's inside the club. And so she was speaking up for the club that she thinks she's a part of. When you hear these clowns trying to defend Aaron Persky, especially people like LaDoris Cordell, it's not about the law for them. It's about judicial fiat. These people routinely scoff at the law. They wipe their behinds with the law. And they love the fact that they got their little clique. The judicial proceedings are not determined by the arguments that you make in a courtroom. They're determined particularly by relationships. Lawsuits are decided by what happens behind closed doors, not what happens in open court. You need to know that. Doesn't matter if it's a pimp with a law degree calling himself a prosecutor, or a shyster with a law degree calling himself a defense attorney, or a whore with a gavel calling themselves a judge. They break the law every day. And for them to actually face the wrath of the people is a threat, not to democracy, but to their job security. They got a nice little hustle going, nice little racket going. They're not about to have the public put an end to that. Now, why is that? Why would any allegedly black person like LaDoris Cordell go along with what they know to be the open bigotry of a racist judge? For God's sake, Aaron Persky, he's tried to use as a rhetorical defense. He said that judges have to have the independents to hand down unpopular rulings. Why? What I did was no different than Brown versus Board of Topeka. You guys know the lawsuit that Thurgood Marshall put forward that allegedly desegregated the schools, allegedly. So he compares letting a rapist get away with rape to black children getting an education. Lets you know where his mentality came from. And Doris Cordell didn't say a damn word about that. She had no problem defending this guy. In fact, she was on the verge of tears when she found out that he was going to get successfully recalled. She's talking now about how they're going to continue fighting this recall even after it's over. They're going to try to figure out, can they get the recall overturned somehow? Can they get it neutralized? Can they get it thrown out? You got this piece of white trash who sits here and compares black children who simply want an education to a white rapist. It's like talking about medical malpractice. In many states, in fact, in practically all the states, I believe, before you can actually sue a doctor for medical malpractice under state law in most states, you have to get another doctor who's willing to agree that such and such doctor who screwed you up committed some sort of malpractice. Well, you can probably guess how that works out. All these doctors are part of the exact same medical boards and they're part of the same degree groups and such. So what happens is they all understand that if they all stick together, nobody gets sued. You can't get sued unless you get other doctors to agree that, hey, so-and-so committed malpractice. So they all just band together. They close ranks against the public. And next thing you know, it's practically impossible to sue a doctor for malpractice. This is what you have with these lawyers. They want to make sure that they are immune from judicial malpractice, that they are immune from breaking the law. Well, you should have a judge. Well, the only way the guy gets thrown out is if you get a group of lawyers to agree. But of course, the lawyers will never agree that another lawyer should be thrown off the bench or should be forced from office. So that way, they're all protected. And LaDoris Cordell's cool with that. She doesn't have a problem with that at all. Yeah, it's because she herself is a former Superior Court judge, just like Persky. They're both former judges now. And she was one of his colleagues. And as she sees it, she's part of the private club, this white club. She's on the team. And she thinks that she's immune from law. Yeah, but only so long as one of theirs is in charge of the courtroom DA's office. You know, Tip O'Neill was right. All politics is local because it's the local level where the bad guys can most directly and consistently attack you, and where they can most directly and consistently let one another off the hook and help each other to avoid the punishment they deserve. And if there's going to be a political upheaval, the local level is also where that's going to start. So yeah, all politics is indeed local. That's why you don't see me sweating these presidential races. I'm more interested in who the mayor is going to be than I am the president. I'm more interested in who the sheriff's going to be than who the vice president's going to be. None of these people defending Persky want Brock Turner to live in their neighborhood. You don't see LaDoris Cordell say that Brock Turner should be able to get on with his life. Why? I'll help him find a place to live in my neighborhood. He can live in my neighborhood. Doris Cordell wasn't talking like that. Nah, she ain't got a problem with Judge Persky letting a rapist on the streets just so long as he doesn't live in her neighborhood. Their judicial con will remain intact and they can go on making a total mockery of the notion of justice so long as the people aren't able to do anything about it. None of these folk defending Persky want Brock Turner in their neighborhood. None of them say that his conviction was wrong either, though. Notice how none of them said that Brock Turner should never be convicted. So why are they scared? Make no mistake, this panic reaction from them, this is raw, naked fear that you're seeing. And when you see Harvey Levin, of all people, objecting to Aaron Persky's recall, then you know his supporters are dirty as hell. None of these people says that Brock Turner couldn't have gotten a harsher sentence. In fact, they all agree. Yeah, he could have gotten a harder sentence, but it's the judge's call, etc., etc. Instead, they say that the judge has a legal prerogative to give a lighter sentence. If the laws aren't going to be enforced, why even have them? This is the fundamental contradiction of the legal system under white supremacy. White supremacy is not about law, it's about skin color. These legal pundits are defending a system where everyone knows it's not about the law, but it's about what this or that judge decides. It's a rigged game decided by fiat. And this has been the central problem with a illegal injustice system under white supremacy. Without hard and fast rules that must be followed, that apply to everyone, that everyone is equally subject and punished under, then a legal system becomes nothing more than nepotism, patronage, backroom deals, and the personal prejudice of the judge. The court in America is the biggest racket. But like all cons, it only works as long as everyone is in on it. All these people benefit from this crooked fraud that masquerades as so-called justice. That's the reason why you see so many of them who are angry about the recall having succeeded. You see, that's the principle that's at stake here. You may think that there's some system of laws that the injustice system is governed by, but the bad guys here, people like Doris Cordell and others, and Harvey Levin and Jeffrey Toobin, they know what the real deal is. They understand that it all comes down to who you know, not what you know. DAs and judges, as I've documented for you endlessly, refuse to enforce the laws against white defendants. They know that. That's the principle that they're fighting for. That's the principle that Aaron Persky's defenders are trying to uphold and maintain. No wonder Persky thought that it was no big deal. He's been doing it all of his legal career, letting white crooks go, letting white offenders off the hook when they were guilty as hell and knowingly guilty as hell. And practically every other court in the country does the exact same thing. So it's not like he's alone. He's looking at a landscape where he is par for the course. It's just like he's as dirty as everyone else. And nobody else ever gets punished for it, so he didn't think he would either. This was just one irregular case where a judge actually got called to account. How many courtrooms are there in America? How many criminal courts are there in the United States? And out of all those criminal courts, only one case in a place that most people have never even heard of actually has one judge who was so blatantly dirty that even his own defenders couldn't actually defend him. Instead, they were just trying to talk around the edges and defend some legal, made-up idea, judicial independence that they know doesn't exist, just something they made up. Obviously, the illegal injustice system isn't going to be brought down by Judge Persky, former Judge Persky being recalled, and everyone knows it, but they're freaking out because as far as they're concerned, they don't want this to become habit. They don't want the public to look and say, this is what we're going to do whenever a judge hands down a ruling we like. Because the truth of the matter is people know the difference between a judge who handed down the right ruling and a judge who's dirty and prejudiced and biased as hell and was subverting the law as opposed to upholding it. There's a reason why nobody led a recall effort against Lance Ito. They were mad as hell about the OJ verdict, but they couldn't blame the judge. See, the public knows the difference. And scum, trash like Doris Cordell, they know it too. They know that the public understands. But it's a matter of, well, we've been getting away with raping guys in court all this time. Why are you stopping us now? To them, this is sanctioned illegality. In their eyes, it's no crime at all, but it's always been a crime from the very beginning. It is the way the injustice system has always worked. John Adams said that the U.S. is a nation of laws, not a nation of men. What a crock. This country has never been a nation of laws. The United States has never been governed by the rule of law. It has been ruled by white fiat. The system is deliberately set up from the legislatures to the cops to the courts to achieve a predetermined result, a result that is entirely dependent on the color of your skin and nothing else. And whenever either the letter or the spirit of the law interferes with this legal fraud, they just flat out ignore it. They just say, oh, forget about it then. We're letting them off the hook just because. It's white and that's all there is to it. Or we're going to lock you up for life. But there's no evidence against me. Well, you're black and that's all there is to it. The white injustice system is nothing more than a quasi-legal con meant to insulate white people from punishment. And you can sit there and say, well, what about people based on income or connections? I would think that Bill Cosby would put the lie to that stupid talk about, well, if you got money, even if you're black, you can beat the rap. No, you can't. Ask O.J. Simpson about that. See, if you're black, all that happens is they decide, we're going to come after you for something. We're staying on you until we get you. Look at R. Kelly. We're staying on you till we get you. If you're white, one and done. No double jeopardy. If you're black, then you are under permanent surveillance until they can find something, anything that they can get you on. Bill Cosby thought that he had security because a civil suit, a civil proceeding, had been
locked. The civil proceeding had a gag order on it. You couldn't go back to it until the judge decided, oh, we're lifting that gag order on it. We're opening up the books on this because we think there's something in there we can get you on. And hence they were able to take a civil suit and weaponize it into a criminal suit. They were able to take a civil suit and weaponize it into a criminal case. That's what happens when you're black. When you're white, they're not trying to do that to you. They're not going to. They should. These white guys like Harvey Weinstein, he's just the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg. So no, it's not a matter of money. It's a matter of skin color. The only times whenever justice has ever prevailed in a white court has been when a group of outsiders forced the system to do something that it wasn't designed to do. That's what happened here with Aaron Persky. You had a group of determined outsiders who made up their minds that they were going to get the system to do something that it wasn't supposed to do. It's not supposed to punish judges. The system is never supposed to punish judges under these circumstances, no matter how outrageous their rulings. The judges have complete fiat to ignore the law. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to be basically referees. Instead, you got judges who decide, oh, forget that. I know what verdict I want to see. Even though this didn't have anything to do with black people, and truth be told, it doesn't benefit black people per se, it was still gratifying to see it happen. Because the first thing that is not supposed to occur under white injustice is for the practitioners of judicial fraud to be personally held accountable and punished for their actions. That's where the rubber meets the road. Do the bastards get punished? Do you put some pain on them? Do you take something away from them? Do you hurt them? If you do, then justice has occurred. If you don't, then there's been no justice. So no wonder there's so many shysters out there with Persky. They're all playing the same game, and if it's over for him, that means it could well be over for them too. We've always known that no matter how passionately lawyers may claim to be in court when they're arguing against each other, no matter how close to blows they may act like they are while working on a trial, the truth is these people are not enemies at all. They're colleagues. They go and have drinks. They're often married to one another. And as we saw with the OJ trial, these scumbags have been sleeping with each other. You hear them call one another that all the time, by the way, whether they're on opposite sides of the case or not. As soon as this or that particular trial is over, they go from being opponents to colleagues. And not to get too far off in the weeds, but that term colleague, what does it mean? Well, it comes from two words, both of them derived from Latin, of course. The first being com, which means with or together, and the second one being legare, which basically means to be sent as a deputy or with some sort of mission, commission, something to be doing. So basically what it means is you've got someone who is sent to work with another person. That's what colleague basically means. Two people who are in league with one another. They're partners, not enemies. You seem to think that because they sit here and make a good show of being so vociferous with their arguments against each other that, oh, these guys, they can't stand each other. Who are you kidding? They understand what's going on here. You don't. So when they say we're colleagues, that means that they work together. Doesn't matter if they call themselves DA, defense attorney. Doesn't matter if they call themselves legal counsel in civil suit. They're working together, okay? And working together for what? I mean, how the world is when working together. Working together to achieve what? Because they understand their real profession. And that's to forward the legal fiction that there's an actual system of laws when in fact it's a racialist pyramid scheme. What you call laws are merely a procedural structure for that racialist persecution. And what they call courts are in fact nothing more than taxpayer-funded stages where these judicial actors get to put on a bit of legal theater. People like Ladoris Cordell are the clowns who think they're on some sort of judicial inside track. As they see it, they're the special Negroes who know better than the rest of us. They're self-appointed spokespeople for black folks. No, they're not self-appointed. In the case of Ladoris Cordell, people like her are white appointed. And by the way, did I mention that Ladoris Cordell is also a self-described feminist too? Yeah, that's how she calls herself. She says she's a feminist. Black feminist who goes to the mat to protect a white man who compared his decision to let a white rapist walk to Brown v. Board of Education. Now you know how Ladoris Cordell got to be a judge. They understood that she would be politically reliable. both brain typing, working overtime on that scumbag, not that there was much brains for them to have to analyze. In theory, the American injustice system is supposed to be trial by jury. We all know that DAs work to make sure that the jury is all white and the judges allow them to do it, except for judges like O. Stevens. But judges like Ladorus Cordell always allow the DAs to make sure that they ethnically cleanse the jury of all black people. They let them get away with it, never call them on the mat for it. They never decide that they're going to censure them for it. They never admonish them for it. They don't do anything. And neither has Aaron Persky. You cannot find one case where these people have ever admonished a DA for using the voir dire process to remove all black people from a jury pool. You've never seen them do it, and you're not going to see them do it. That's not their job. Their job is to make sure that white people are immune from law. Forward a judicial fiction. But at least in theory, the basis of the legal system is supposed to be that you're tried by a jury of your peers. And that doesn't mean a jury of lawyers or other legal professionals. Most people who are on trial are not legal professionals. Ladorus Cordell herself excoriated the public for recalling Persky. Her excoriation was based on, well, these people are just uninformed in their desire to remove a rogue judge. That makes them uninformed. No, the people are quite informed. They understand that this is not a court, but it is in fact a quasi-legal racket. They understand that it's not about the law. It is about the judge's personal biases and prejudices, and that this is how the injustice system works. The public understands that clearly. They are quite clear on the issues. Ladorus Cordell sees the public, however, as a bunch of ignorant rubes. They're not smart enough to understand what's good for them. She knows what's good for the public, but the public doesn't know what's good for them. Yes, having a rapist able to get away with it, free to walk the streets only mere weeks after his crime, that's in the public's interest. That's what the public wants. The public needs to be informed about how good that is. Now imagine that, by the way. Who would want a bunch of ordinary laymen, just a bunch of folks off the streets, to be able to weigh in on serious criminal cases? I mean, these are just working stiffs. They're not fine legal minds like Ladorus Cordell. Who would want these ham and eggers to be able to sit in judgment of a legal proceeding? Oh, I forgot. Having laymen weigh the fate of a defendant is the entire basis of the trial by jury system. That's what American law is supposed to be based on. It's supposed to be based on having a bunch of laymen, people off the streets, just average Joes, who decide the guilt or innocence of another person. That's the basis of the trial by jury system. That's what juries are. You're not being put on trial by the Supreme Court, 9 judicial eggheads in robes. You got a bunch of 12 people off the streets. It's supposed to be a jury of your peers. Peers meaning people who are just like you. That's what the law calls for. It's supposed to be people just like you. If you're not a lawyer, well, you probably shouldn't be tried. Your fate should be decided by a jury of lawyers. That's the law. That's the standard. But it's one that Ladorus Cordell hates. And in all of Ladorus Cordell's impassioned defenses of Brock Turner, not one time, not even once, does she ever mention his victim. Neither does Aaron Persky. None of them mention Brock Turner's victim. They don't give one solitary word to her. That's not an oversight. It is them declaring to the white powers that be that they are loyal soldiers for white immunity from law. That's what Ladorus Cordell was doing. She was declaring to the white powers that be, hey, even if a white woman is the one who gets raped, I'm not going to say a word on her behalf. I understand that this is about white male privilege. It's about making sure the white men get away with it. I get it. I understand. I'm on the team. Ladorus Cordell even went so far as to claim that the recall scares her and that it's dangerous. Recalling a crooked judge scares her. Recalling a crooked judge who handed down a blatantly prejudiced and biased verdict to let a rapist go, that scares you? Having the public up in arms that a rapist didn't get punished scares Ladorus Cordell. So as she sees it, clearly she declares that letting rapists walk the streets, that's not dangerous, because she didn't say a word about that. She didn't say Brock Turner being on the streets is dangerous. She didn't say Brock Turner being on the streets scares me. Instead, as far as she's concerned, well, we got to brush over that. This is about Aaron Persky. She doesn't say a word about the victim. She doesn't say a word about Brock Turner's freedom scaring her, even though you know him to be a rapist. You know this guy will literally drag a woman behind a dumpster and rape her. But that doesn't scare LaDoris Cordell. That doesn't strike her as being dangerous. Holding rogue judges to account for letting rapists go, well, that scares her. She looks at that and that makes her quake in her boots. So she's not scared that Brock Turner's going to decide to have his rapacious fun with her. That she's not scared of that. But threatening the job security of out of control crooks with law degrees, that does scare her. That tells you what her mentality is. That tells you where she's coming from. She lives in her legal bubble with her other white lawyer pals. She'll be damned if anyone's going to pierce that bubble. Reality is not allowed to infringe on her legal free ride. These are the people who populate the judicial profession in this country, folks. And as they see it, the real enemy here is democracy. That's what LaDoris Cordell hates. That's what she's fighting. She can't stand democracy. To her, the real problem is democracy, because it potentially can be influenced by the public. That's the problem with democracy. The unwashed masses, the people who are not supposed to be able to get their way, the system was set up for a select few. And the masses were supposed to be locked out. Doesn't matter if it's law, business, what have you. So whenever you got the man on the street who's able to get his way, all of a sudden, there's something wrong with the system. This shouldn't happen. This is dangerous. This threatens the entire system. Yeah, the system of giveaways to a select few. LaDoris Cordell and her legal welfare that she's been benefiting off of for decades. She said it herself. As she sees it, the public is an uninformed mass of fools. Well, the only one who is uninformed on the issue is LaDoris Cordell. She and her cabal of law degree wielding punks, they didn't get their way and they're mad about it. And instead of them saying, you know what, we need to take our case to the people, they looked and said, well, no, the people already know it. They couldn't make an argument. There was no argument to be made. So instead what they're doing is they're going, well, we need to find a judge who will overturn this. Yeah, they're showing you where they're coming from. This isn't about convincing 12 people on a jury. It's not about convincing the voters. It's not about convincing the public. It is all about a system of white judicial fiat. It's about getting your way simply because. And that is the principle that has to be upheld. It's important to them. Aaron Persky could have taken this case to people, but he didn't. And the reason why is supposed to be a matter of, I don't have to take my case to you. You, the unwashed masses, the public, you are irrelevant to the process. The process is not decided based on what 12 rubes, 12 ham and eggers, 12 laymen in a jury box say. It's determined by what insiders say. And I'm one of the insiders, or at least I was. That's where LaDoris Cordell's coming from. You have the elites who are making clear their contempt for the public. And they're also making it clear that they are going to prey on the public. She talks about the public more harshly than she does about Brock Turner, a convicted rapist. LaDoris Cordell had more contempt, more anger, more outrage. She had more derision and hatred for the public than she did for the guy who raped a woman. She didn't have anything to say about that. She had not one solitary word to say about that. And this woman was a Superior Court judge. No, the people understand exactly what's going on. Laws are allegedly for the benefit of the public. We all understand that Persky and LaDoris Cordell and their law license cabal, they see that the law exists for the benefit of them. It's not for the benefit of the public. The law exists for the benefit of a select people who, once they get their pals in there, all of a sudden, the gears of justice only turn against black people, and even then they turn even when they're not supposed to. But if you're white, well, the law takes a holiday. Yeah, the public gets that. That's what scares these guys. Their attitude of absolute entitlement is why we have so many people who are in prison without cause, and we got so many criminals on the streets without justification. The law is their toy, and they're mad that the public, for at least one day, seems to have taken the toy away and threatens to take the toy away from others of them. And this attitude is not merely arrogance, it is psychopathological. And when you see even the DA Rosen, the guy who was supposed to be prosecuting Brock Turner, even he himself was siding with Persky. He was sitting there saying, well, we shouldn't be recalling the guy. That's how you know that they're all working in collusion. The very DA who lost the case, he was saying, well, we shouldn't be recalling the judge. Now, he didn't opt to remain silent. He decided, I have to speak out. I must speak. I must speak in defense of the judge. The judge who I said had no reason to let this rapist go. I must speak in his defense. He didn't speak in defense of the victim. He's the DA. He didn't speak in defense of the victim, Roger, the victim either. So that law degree is what determines whether or not these people see something right or wrong. It would have been one thing if the DA had remained silent, but he chose to speak out, and this was what he said. DA, this Rosen character, he's as dirty as Persky. This Persky character is a reprobate. He's a criminal operating under color of law, and the way these lawyers have across the board come out to support him reminds me of another criminal who committed his crimes from behind color of law, Peter Liang, who murdered Akai Gurley in New York. None of Persky's supporters give so much as a word of acknowledgement to the victim. They don't even bother to deny that she's a victim. Instead, it's all about how put upon the white guy is. He's a good guy, really. So good guys rape people. Nice to know. And don't let these clowns that you see online try to con you with that garbage about how this is going to make things worse for black and brown defendants. You look at how the prisons are full and overflowing with black people. These judges have not used their judicial independence in order to hand down fair verdicts against black people or in order to dismiss charges that should never have been brought in the first place. When it comes to black people, it's going to take a miracle to keep you going to prison. The very fact that you get accused of a crime means that there's a better than 90% chance you're going to go to jail. And as I've already documented for you over and over again, there are black people sitting in jail who haven't even been on trial. In fact, black people who are sitting in jail right now who haven't even been charged. They got arrested, but they never got charged. That's what's happening in Rikers Island. All these black folks who are in there, who are there merely because they got arrested, haven't even been charged yet. He had a case in Los Angeles. I'm probably going to say the gentleman's name wrong, but like Michael Williams or Michael Johnson or something. I forget what the gentleman's name was. But the Los Angeles DA's office fought it all the way to the Supreme Court. They wanted this guy in jail even though he hadn't been charged. That's the thing. It's one thing if you say, well, this guy got convicted and we think that he should stay in prison even though there's no evidence against him. They didn't go that far. They say, we haven't even charged him, but we should have the right to keep him locked up in perpetuity without charge. Now, that blatantly violates the Constitution. You cannot be held indefinitely without charge. You are entitled to a speedy trial. Now, if you're a white guy, by the way, you can get the charges thrown out on the basis of, I didn't get charged fast enough. In fact, I've documented for you how there have been these white defendants, and Brock Turner's going to try the same thing to say, well, you didn't bring the charges fast enough. The Constitution says that I'm entitled to a speedy trial, and the charges didn't come fast enough, so you got to throw all this out. Throw the conviction out because of the Constitution. I have a right to a speedy trial, and I didn't get my speedy trial. You got white guys who do that all the time. It works because they're white. It's not about whether or not you violate the Constitution. It's a white person who comes up with a line of crap to excuse away their behavior. And the system gives that a salute. That's what it's based on, white fiat. If you're black, on the other hand, and you're sitting in jail and haven't even been charged, well, there's no argument that you can bring that the Constitution somehow is supposed to be brought into play. And you're supposed to not only be released, but you're supposed to also get damages because your constitutional rights have been violated. There's no argument you can bring. And Ladoris Cordell isn't going to be representing you on that one either. She ain't going to be standing up for you. And neither will Harvey Levin, and neither will Jeffrey Toobin, and neither would Aaron Persky. Yeah, you better understand, okay? This judicial independence claptrap, that's just white code for we need for judges to be able to exercise white fiat. Judges need to be able to arbitrarily decide that white defendants can't go to jail. And when you can't threaten that white fiat, they always try to take their white corruption and name it something else. It's not racism. It is merely us discriminating. Well, it's not discrimination. It's us making choice. Well, it's critical decision making. You see, it's not racial profiling. It's merely criminal analysis. You see, it's not white fiat. It's judicial independence. See the con? They already throw the book at us as standard operating procedure. They can't be any harder on us than they already are now. They're not going to be any worse to us. They're already locking black folks up left, right, and center. What's happening is these scumbags are sitting here they're tying a noose around their own necks, and they're claiming that we're going to be the ones who are hurt if they jump. That's what's going on here. What happened to Aaron Persky is not going to make things any harder for black people. It just won't. Don't let anyone try to tell you. Now, when you see LaDoris Cordell talking that crap, she can't name one time when Aaron Persky has decided that he was going to dismiss charges against a black defendant, no matter how guilty that defendant might have seemed. They can't point to any time when a black person was cut a break because of some white judge deciding that they were going to engage in judicial independence. We can quote chapter and verse, white defendant after white defendant, guilty as hell. I just got through documenting for you about a couple of weeks ago about how you had some white rapists who were allowed to get away with raping children, some as young as 5 years old. And the judges let him go. See, that's what judicial independence is about. It's about making sure that no matter how guilty a white defendant is, he goes free. And no matter how innocent a black defendant is, he goes to prison. Judges have given black defendants sentences that aren't even allowed based under law. And all of these white civil libertarians are nowhere to be seen when this stuff goes down. None of them are demanding that judges be recalled for handing down sentences that didn't fit the crime. You never see them demand that a judge be taken off the bench for any reason. There seems to be nothing that a judge can do that a LaDoris Cordell or a Jeffrey Toobin or any of the other of these scumbags will ever be moved to say this judge should not be on the bench. There seems to be nothing that a judge can do to cross the line that will make them say this guy needs to be off the bench or that a DA ought to be removed from office. So you see, that position is consistent. That's what lets you know where these people are coming from. Where is the consistency? Consistency is on the side of whoever is the judge. You got to make sure he stays there, unless it's Olu Stevens. If you're a judge who's going to demand that you can't have all white juries, well, you know, we don't really have a position on that, which means that they are cool with Olu Stevens being persecuted. You got a judge who says that the law says you cannot ethnically cleanse the jury pool. You got a judge who actually stands up for the fact that black defendants ought to have a majority black jury, and that the law understands that white people are inherently racist, especially DAs. These people work as a collective voting bloc, not just at the polls, not just on the job, not just in the legislatures, but in the courtrooms and everywhere else, and the courtrooms to the boardrooms, from the boardroom to the school board. I'll be here all day making up the puns, but you know what I'm getting at. Across the board, people act as a collective voting bloc to persecute black people. Judge Olu Stevens is the only guy who's got the guts to call it out and say, not my courtroom. You don't see LaDoris Cordell riding in to support him. Where's the judicial independence talk at now, huh? And Judge Olu Stevens has been under persecution for years. Nobody's talking about judicial independence for him. Nobody's talking about that for him at all. Yeah, because you see, Judge Olu Stevens is standing up for the wrong people. He's standing up for black people. And the laws were written to punish black people. The judge is not supposed to be getting in the way of that. So you see, that's the consistency. That lets you know the con that's at work here. Don't question the judge as long as he's letting white defendants get away with murder. But if he stands up for black defendants getting a fair trial, well, we got to stop this guy. Maintaining white legal immunity. That's what's going on. People talk about criminal justice reform all the time. Get off the crap, okay? Get off the meth, all right? Do you want to know what the solution for criminal justice reform would be wrapped up in a cute little soundbite? Well, here it is. Black defendants are punished too harshly, and white defendants are not punished at all. If you reverse that, you will change the entire problem. When black defendants are not punished so harshly, and white offenders are punished to the maximum extent of the law, that will be criminal justice reform. Full stop. What would criminal justice reform look like? It would be black defendants no longer getting the book thrown at them automatically just because, and evidence be damned, while white defendants no longer get away scot-free. When white defendants go down for the max consistently, when you have police who no longer overlook whites engaging in criminality, or decide that they're going to lowball charge, or DAs trying to reduce the charges to misdemeanors, or judges throwing the case out, dismissing the charges, or giving the lightest sentence possible. When that stops, that will be criminal justice reform. White defendants are held to the same standard as black ones. The system works exactly the opposite of how it allegedly should. And the principal reason isn't class, it's not income, it ain't gender, it's race. No judge has ever had to fear being run out of office because he was too lenient with black defendants, because none of the judges ever are. They are hard as hell on the black defendants, whether they did it or not. You don't see the judges sitting here going, man, I let Pookie and Ray Ray off the hook for killing a 5-year-old, so I'm scared. No, forget it. That doesn't happen. So there's no black defendant who is ever going to benefit from judges being emboldened to hand down unpopular verdicts. The unpopular verdicts are always about white defendants who were guilty as hell and allowed to get away with it. That's what it comes from. And none of these post-election hacks who were in front of the cameras giving their clearly uninformed opinions, and few opinions were as uninformed as Ladorus Cordell's, none of them ever weighs in on that reality, that black defendants have not been benefiting from any sort of judicial independence. This is just a talking point, a ridiculous one that is just flat on its face, able to be disproven simply with common sense. I ain't even got to cite any legal sort of precedent for it. I don't even have to add up the cases. We all know that black defendants get screwed regardless of guilt or innocence. But apparently Ladorus Cordell, in her little white-generated legal mafia bubble, she doesn't seem to know about that. So you really want to listen to this woman? Really? We know the reason that the courts are out of control is because you got DAs and judges who can do whatever they want because they know that there won't be any consequences. These guys are acting illegally because, like Jeffrey Toobin said, and he was letting you know that he's mobbed up with them. Well, you know, the public will forget about all this. That was his way of encouraging bad guys, letting them know that, well, don't worry about these idiots you see out here saying they want to recall the judge. Well, you know, we're in a climate of protest. People are just protesting everything for no reason, and they'll get it out of their system to go away. When it comes time to vote, well, the people who always vote for the Aaron Perskeys, they'll show up and, you know, things will go on as they always have. Nothing will change. Don't worry about it. Just a tempest in a teapot. Yeah, he wasn't talking about judicial independence to benefit black people. None of them did. That was their Hail Mary. They always try to use black people as their political crash dummies. Aaron Persky talking about trying to hide behind black children in the 1950s so that he could excuse letting a white rapist off the hook. Ladorus Cordell trying to hide behind black people. There's a reason why they put her out there. She was out in front of the cameras more than any other of Aaron Persky's well-wishers and defenders. They put her out there more than anyone else, using the dog whistle language, or rather dog whistle imagery. I guess they figured they were going to get some black folks to think, we can't let this white rapist be denounced in the book. We need white rapists to be able to get away with it. You see, if white people can get away with their crimes, that benefits black people. How does it benefit black people for white folks to get away with crime? How does it benefit anybody for white people to get away with crimes? Well, Ladorus Cordell and Aaron Persky say that it does. These animals won't change. And all the tisk-tisking from white liberals who are always on the sidelines hasn't changed any of that. So if the people who administrate the legal proceedings are the problem, when does it become okay to identify them as the problem and finally punish the bastards? I'd like to know that. You notice how you never see these guys say what the line should be? If Aaron Persky's blatant judicial bias and prejudice, if his deliberately subverting the law in front of everyone and letting a rapist get away with it, if that doesn't rise to the level of deserving to be recalled, then what does? Do you know that in the entire history of the Supreme Court, I can't think of any time when a Supreme Court justice has ever been taken off the bench? People are angry with Supreme Court decisions all the time, and some of them are blatantly political. And yet, the part of the Constitution that talks about how Supreme Court justices can be removed from the bench for political high-handedness, that never comes up. Never happens. Really? You got judges who have been removed from the bench, DAs who have been voted out of office or even successfully prosecuted, and yet no Supreme Court judge in 200 years. No Supreme Court judge, no Supreme Court justice has ever been removed for high-handedness, not even one. None at all. All the cases they hear, the most Court cases, which in many cases they hand down horrible rulings that make things worse instead of better. And yet, for some strange reason, nobody thinks that these guys have ever engaged in high-handedness. They hand down rulings that define how the nation works, that defines how billion-dollar corporations get to make money. The fate of the nation depends on what the Supreme Court hands down. And you're telling me that nobody's trying to pull the strings behind the scenes. Nobody's trying to influence them. Nobody. I told you about how Antonin Scalia, may he rest in hell, before he handed down his little part of the ruling that helped to dismantle the Civil Rights Act, he sat there in open court and bragged that nobody was ever going to strike down the Voting Rights Act or any of this stuff. They said he said late, and I'm almost quoting verbatim, that the legislatures would never ever get rid of this because why? Even the wording was considered to be righteous and nobody was going to strike it down, so the courts had to do it. Now he sits there and says the legislatures wouldn't do it because the politicians were scared of being voted out of office, which tells you this is what the people wanted. And he says, to hell with what the people want. To hell with what the law says. You got these right-wing nuts who are always talking about judicial activists. And Antonin Scalia gave a bold, blatant admission of judicial activism, that he understood that the people were never going to vote against the Voting Rights Act. They would never vote to overturn, repeal, or undermine the Voting Rights Act. The legislatures would never do it because they feared the wrath of the public. They understood what it would stand for. I mean, this guy sounded like a freaking James Bond villain, just blatantly admitting we are evil incorporated. And then he says, well, we're going to do it because this is what needs to happen. Not, well, yeah, we know the legislature doesn't like it and the people don't like it and nobody will ever support it, but this is what needs to happen. You're going to tell me that nobody ever got to Antonin Scalia? The bastard was a blatant racist his entire life, part of all sorts of right-wing think tanks, non-think tanks, rather. These people are on the take 5 ways from Sunday. Yet you never see people in the legal profession saying that we need some sort of means to punish Supreme Court justices. You don't see them saying that. What they do is, at best, these right-wing nuts will say, well, the Supreme Court judicial activists, this is why you need to vote for so-and-so. They use it as a springboard to say vote for whomever. Because the truth of the matter is the right wing, if anyone, has benefited more from judicial activism than the left. Antonin Scalia was only one of a number of verdicts being handed down by individuals who didn't have a legal basis for it. They just sat there and said, well, not even citing law. And that's supposed to be what the Supreme Court does. Every word that a Supreme Court justice says in regards to a case is supposed to be rooted in law, rooted in case law, rooted in legal precedent. They're supposed to be showing how the law applies. Instead, they just pull it out of their behinds, and this is what we want. They're not supposed to be a part of the legislature. And yet that's how so many of them have operated. Nobody asked whether or not this might be because they're on the take. Somebody's got them on the payroll. Antonin Scalia, to me, that was a confession. It was a confession that he was taking orders. That was as clear-cut a case of political high-handedness as there could ever be. But you don't even see the people on the left talking about it. Yeah, because what Antonin Scalia was doing was attacking black people. Now, if he had done something that white women didn't like, then all of a sudden they'd be up in arms about it. If he was doing something that white folks didn't approve of, then yeah, then all of a sudden, we need to look at this Antonin Scalia guy. See, when Mike Nifong lost his job, it was because he prosecuted some white boys who were accused of having raped a black woman. See, if you're somebody who goes after white guys for attacking a black female, well, you got to lose your job, and in Mike Nifong's case, you got to lose your freedom too. They got to go after you. This guy was just prosecutorial misconduct. This guy was engaged in all sorts of malicious prosecution. We can't just take his law degree. We got to take his freedom too. He's got to be in a prison cell when this is all over. And that's exactly what they got. And it was okay to celebrate that. You didn't have anybody saying, gee, DAs are going to be terrified to prosecute anyone because if you go after a defendant who happens to have some sort of support base, why, you could lose your law degree, you can lose your freedom. This is going to put a chilling effect on DAs. Nobody was saying that. Nobody was saying it. Nobody on the right, damn sure nobody on the left. Nobody was saying it. Oh, so it's okay to go after DAs who prosecute rapists, but it's not okay to go after a judge who lets an admitted rapist go? When a judge is being thrown out of office because he doesn't give a white man a harsh sentence, well, all of a sudden the law and order crowd is silent. Where's President Trump at? Where's President Loudmouth at? President Tangerine is nowhere to be seen. Where's the law and order types at? Where's old Jefferson Beauregard Sessions the third? Where are these clowns at? Where's false news? I mean, Fox News at to say it's outrageous that a rapist gets away with it and the judge gets punished. You would think that Fox would be cheering that on. After all, aren't they the ones who are always whining about judicial activists? Yeah, but they ain't talking about this one, are they? They know what's really going on here. They understand the potential Pandora's box could be open. They understand what the real threat here is. This sets a dangerous precedent for white power potential if it becomes habit. If people start deciding to do this as a matter of course, whenever a white guy gets away with a crime, we're going to go after the judge, we're going to go after the DA, people are going to lose their jobs. What's going to happen is the DA is going to have to prosecute merely to keep his job. The judge is going to have to hand down a hard sentence to keep his job. You don't want people having the idea that DAs and judges must punish white offenders to the fullest extent of the law. That is the principle that Doris Cordell and Aaron Persky and all the rest of the scum and trash are trying to uphold. That's what they're so up in arms about. You can't have a white man getting punished under the law. The laws were not written to punish them. They were written to punish black people. These people are all but coming out and saying it, folks. If people will throw out a judge for not punishing a white man harshly enough, then what's to stop the public from throwing judges off the bench for sentencing black defendants too harshly? See, that's the flip side of the coin. White supremacy understands that there is a necessary duality of work. White supremacy cannot exist without black denigration, but black denigration can also not exist without white supremacy. You cannot have one without the other. If you are diminishing the ability of white people to get a free ride at the courts, you are also diminishing the ability of black people to be railroaded in the courts. That's what they understand is going on here. If you have parity of sentencing, parity of judicial consideration, then what happens is black folks are going to go to prison a lot less and white folks are going to go to prison a lot more. What's to stop the public from banding together in order to remove judges who systematically single out black defendants for hard punishment while consistently giving white guys a slap on the wrist? What's to stop that from being the status quo? What's to stop it from making it where whenever it comes time for election season, the ads are going to say that Judge Doris Cordell allowed white defendants to get away with it and made it where black defendants who were innocent went to prison? Why isn't that ever the sort of ad that you see whenever it comes time for a judicial election, when it comes out of vote on the judges who are put in office? Why is it that nobody ever points out that, hey, look at all these black defendants, racism in the courtrooms? We need to have racial equality in the courtrooms, make where black folks are not getting railroaded. Nobody ever says that. Nobody ever stands up for that. This could be one of those things that becomes part of a steady drip, potentially, or at least it sets a precedent for people to come back to this later. Keep in mind, when Brock Turner, when that whole scandal went down, Me Too hadn't even started. But as a matter of coincidence, now here it is, and it helped to give a little bit of extra fuel to the fire. This white female empowerment movement, which is all that Me Too and Time's Up is. It's a clumsy front for white female power advocates. But be that as it may, it doesn't remove the fact that you still have a situation where a movement that might not have had enough strength to remove Aaron Persky because of the fact that the social winds have changed blue at an inopportune moment for him, now it did. It swept him from office very easily. He couldn't fight the tide. He got blown away and it wasn't even close. And the reason that so many of his white judicial advocates are so scared is they understand the basis for law. The basis for law is not what's written up by a legislature. The only thing that holds any organization or any system together is the willingness of those who didn't create it to support it. You didn't write the laws, but you're the one who gives the law force. When you decide that you're going to submit to the police arresting you, or you're going to decide that the police can attack you and that you're not going to do anything about it, that makes it where they decide who gets punished and who doesn't, because you're damn sure not doing it. You tolerate it. You stand for it. That is what holds any system together. When the people who didn't create the system go along with it anyway. The people who created the system, they don't have the power to hold it together. You do, as a collective. White supremacy is a con, and nowhere is the inner dynamic of this con game more apparent than its current monetary system, which is not based on gold, not based on anything other than faith in the system. That is the purest example of white supremacy right here. Why is the dollar the benchmark currency of the world? Why is the dollar the benchmark currency? It's not based on gold, not based on anything in the real world. It's based on faith in the system. What the hell is that faith based on? It's failing schools, crumbling infrastructure, corrupt politicians, a so-called law enforcement apparatus that is racist and corrupt as hell. What do you have faith in? What is this faith based upon? Why do we not topple white supremacy? It's because we, as Black people, whether we wish to admit it or not, we have bought wholesale into the con. People know that the dollars in their pocket probably aren't even worth the paper that they're printed on, yet people lie, cheat, steal, and kill for these all but worthless pieces of paper. Because the system by which goods and services are organized is situated around these all but useless pieces of paper, and people go along as if. They act as if these pieces of paper still have value, still trade for them, treat them. They create a fiction, and they make the fiction real because they go along with it. The people have not devised an alternative, but even if they did, would a sufficient number of people go along with an alternative? The real reason that money is no longer based on gold is for the same reason that people say that American Idol is a great TV show, because enough people are willing to act as if it's true. And when a critical mass of the people believe in something, well, that makes it as good as reality. Worthless pieces of paper based on faith become good as gold. You can take those pieces of paper in your pocket and go buy some real gold right now. So the fiction is more solid and more legitimate than the reality because the people give it legitimacy. And the perception of legitimacy, the mass agreement that this or that is legitimate, that's what gives the organization the cohesion that it needs. When the masses have bought into the idea that this is more or less legitimate, people have to act as if something has legitimacy in order to make it so. And they must also act as if something is illegitimate in order to make it so. The operative term there being act. When people see these out of control white supremacists hiding behind badges with guns, and they still treat them as something other than criminals, you treat them as if they're somehow the law when you know damn well that they're not, you have given them the legitimacy of law. When you treat them as if they are not the law because they do not act as the law, then your refusal to give them legitimacy disempowers them. Okay? Black empowerment is real. It is the answer. But we don't yet have the critical mass of Black people required to act as if it's real yet in order to make it an option. So in a real sense, even though Black empowerment is real, even though it's the answer, even though it's what we need, in a real sense, Black empowerment is not legitimate at all. Yet. On the other hand, we can tell white supremacy is a con. We can see the damn thing crumbling right in front of us. We all agree that white supremacy is going to fall apart at some point. Though I shouldn't say it's going to fall apart immediately. It won't, because Black people have the ability to knock it over. But, apparently we got better things to do. But we can see that white supremacy is rotting from the inside out. Even its practitioners and beneficiaries are predicting its demise. Yet we still work to prop it up, and many of us are willing to fight and die to protect it. Why? Because most of us have opted to go along with the con. And it's not even because we see white supremacy as legitimate per se. It's not desirable, but we accept it anyway. And the fact that we refuse to act against white supremacy, the fact that we refuse to put action behind our disbelief in white supremacy's legitimacy, the fact that we don't act as if it's illegitimate gives it de facto legitimacy. In order to delegitimize anything, you cannot merely bring doubt or disbelief. You have to bring action. You got to denounce it. You got to say, we're going to act against this. We will not let this stand. You see the white media going on about the offensive to scare people. Oh, what about judicial independence? They saw what happened to Persky, and they don't want the public to repeat that ever again. They can't punish the public, so they're attempting to scare the public. What happened to Aaron Persky is an open expression that the people don't see the self-appointed gatekeepers of the law as being legitimate. That's the real problem that they have here. People like Aaron Persky are not seen as legitimate. And they see this wave of people who are angry with all of these illegitimate racist punks who are the ones who are administrating a white injustice system. They saw the wave of righteous indignation and outrage sweep away Anita Alvarez. They saw it blow away Dale Cox. They saw it sweep to wash away trash like Tim McGinty and Angela Corey. They saw that. They're looking and going, man, we got to stop this. We got to tell people that the system will fall apart if you don't let the white supremacists just do whatever they want. The system will fall apart if the white supremacists are too scared to exercise white supremacy. That's what they're really saying. In order for any system to perpetuate itself, the people of a necessity must accept it. It's not a matter of they can or should. They have to accept it. Now, they don't have to accept it happily or even willingly, but they must go along with it. They can go along with it sadly, or they can go along with it angrily. Black people have perfected the art of being angry collaborators with white supremacy. But as long as the people toe the line, that's all that really counts. You ain't got to do it happily, but you just got to do it. White supremacy dictates the outcome of legal proceedings. And while it's neither legal, even by white people's own laws, and it's certainly not justice, the people accept it. So its illegitimacy and even outright illegality doesn't matter. You see, the only true law is whether or not the people are willing to accept something. You can go all the way back to the Bible with that. The Apostle Paul said that if the people are of one accord on something, that becomes a law unto itself. Laws don't get their power from politicians. They don't get their power from judges like Aaron Persky or Ladoris Cordell. And the law damn sure doesn't get its power from the enforcement arm of white supremacy, the police. The force of law is an unspoken agreement between society's rulers and the people who are ruled over. The so-called leaders hand down one asinine edict after the next, each one more unjust, more outrageous than the last, more ridiculous than the one before. And no matter how intolerable these increasingly odious rules are, the rulers have the ability to shape and reshape the society so long as the people allow themselves to be pushed around. Because it's not the society that's being reshaped, it's the people who are being reshaped by the laws. And that only goes on as long as the people allow it to. That's what scares these guys. Because if these would-be oligarchs are trying to get one thing done that's harmful to the people, but the people make it clear, hell no, we ain't going along with it, then what do? You ain't got enough cops to browbeat them into obedience. And you can't scare them into obedience. And the people are no longer willing to go along with it. So what are you going to do? Especially when the people say we're looking at the folks who are ruling over us and they gotta go. What the hell do you do then? Well, what you do is you pull out the old Orwellian playbook. You bring out the old double-speak dictionary. You know, the one that says that slavery is actually freedom and white supremacy is actually justice. And white domination is the best of all possible worlds. That's what you do. You take the lies, you take the con game, and you tell people that what they want, they don't want to be free. They want to be enslaved. Why? Your enslavement, your subjugation under white supremacy, that is freedom. And these guys getting away with letting murderers and rapists walk the streets, that's justice. That's what they're doing. It's supposed to be a psychological firewall that they try to put in place and reinforce and prop it up to make sure that you never, ever defy them. You are the one who has the power to reshape the system. They don't. Because ultimately, you're what they're trying to reshape. And if you decide, hell no, I like myself just the way I am, and I don't like things the way that they are under you, now they got a serious problem. They have to find a way to get you to obey. The obedience of the masses is the only thing that separates the powerful from the powerless. The only thing that makes it where Aaron Persky was getting away with this was because the people decided to do nothing about it. And once they decided to do something about him, there was nothing he could do to stop it, and nothing his friends could do to stop it. Nothing that his pals in the legislature could do to stop it. See, that's where the power of law comes from. That's where the force of law comes from. It comes from the people as a group. And that has always been feared by those in authority, because you're the one who gave them the authority in the first place. Without you, they have no authority. And they live in mortal fear of the day they revoke that authority, which is exactly what happened to Aaron Persky. The people gave him the authority, and they exercised their right to take it away. And you don't see any of the people in the white media, in the white judiciary, and many in white society who are cheering that. They see it as a threat. Because these guys in high position are all on the same team. Your indignation and your ability to weaponize that indignation through the ballot box or any other legal means, they fear that. They pass laws on prohibition, but people refuse to follow those laws. And so the government pretended to repeal the law when in truth, they were merely trying to save face by admitting that they had no way to enforce it. They didn't want to have to admit that we didn't have the ability to enforce prohibition, so they pretended to repeal it, when all they were doing was pretending to repeal a law that never really went into effect in the first place. But what happened to Aaron Persky, former Judge Persky? This is qualitatively different. What happened with Persky strikes at the very heart of whether the people who see those who administrate the law as being legitimate, and clearly they don't. The point of the injustice system is to force the public to accept that there's going to be things that are acceptable and things that are not. And people can be locked up and prosecuted and have their money taken away, and they can be publicly punished if you violate certain rules. Yeah, but there are other people who don't get punished no matter how blatant their violation of those same rules happen to be. White men are not to be punished. People accepted that, and hence it became a reality. But now things are threatening to change, perhaps. What's to stop white men who break the law from being punished when the people won't tolerate them not being punished? Wall Street fat cats who Bush and Obama let get away with raping the national economy, none of them have ever been punished. The police who murder black people, the law hasn't punished them. We know all of them are guilty, but the people have accepted the rulings of these judges who they know are corrupt and on the take, and who happen to be on the side of the bad guys. And these courtroom crooks will never allow equal punishment under the law, because that's the very thing that they have banded together to prevent. The law is a con, and it's one that they had rigged from the jump. They've set up the rules in their favor, and even when you catch them breaking the rules, they just give themselves immunity anyway. And the public grudgingly went along with these clearly fraudulent rules until now. So I'm going to wrap this up by pointing out to you that you better not fall for the white media's con job, that Aaron Persky's recall is a threat to anything other than white judicial immunity. That's the only thing that it potentially could be a threat to, though don't expect to see Michelle Dobbin out there standing up for black folks. Don't expect to see her going to the mat for any white man against a white man who gets away with raping a black woman. Don't expect to see her out there for that. She ain't started any crusades for that. See, she knew the family of Brock Turner's victim personally. She knew that woman's family personally. That's the reason why she was out there, because she knew the family personally. It's one of the few instances of justice in the modern era. Remember the book that I keep telling you about, When Corruption Was King, written by Robert Cooley? He was a Chicago lawyer in the 1970s, and one of his first criminal defense cases was the trial of a mafia hitman who was clearly guilty as sin, but the mob bosses, for whatever reason, didn't want this guy to go to jail. Sometimes they'll let their guys go to jail, often they will, but for some reason, I guess this guy was special to one of the capos or something. So the mob bosses decided that this guy couldn't be allowed to go to jail. He was too special to do time. So they had Robert Cooley handle the criminal defense. And they also instructed him to give the judge a bribe. Now, the judge in this case didn't want to take the bribe. And it wasn't because he had not taken bribes before. They chose him for a reason, because he routinely took bribes. The guy was crooked as hell. But the reason that the judge in this case, in this instance, didn't want to take Robert Cooley's bribe is because, as the judge put it, it was so obvious that this mafioso was guilty as sin. The judge knew that if he declared a mistrial, or if he dismissed the charges or whatever, if he threw the case out, it would be obvious to everyone that the judge was on the take and his legal career would be over. That's the only reason why the judge didn't want to take the bribe. It wasn't because he didn't want the money. He did. And it wasn't because he wasn't dirty. He was dirty as hell. So he was looking to go, man, you brought me a case that's so blatantly, obviously guilty. I can't let this guy go. Well, Robert Cooley educated the judge on who it was who wanted this mobster to walk. And he also made sure that the judge was fully clued in on the possible consequences of what would happen if this guy didn't walk. Needless to say, the wise guy got away with it, and the judge's career was effectively over. But I want you to understand, this all went down in the 1970s, okay, over 40 years ago. White media knows why people are angry, because once again, yet another white guy who was guilty as hell was allowed to walk because the law never applies to them. And why is that? Because the people who are supposed to be administrating the law refuse to enforce it against white offenders. So the public is now applying a penalty for this behavior. They're punishing the people who allow white criminals to get away with it. That's what they're scared of. That's what they're terrified of. They're not demanding that any person accused of a crime get life behind bars. The public is not demanding any sort of zero tolerance. Quite the opposite. All they're doing is they're demanding an end to white legal immunity. They want guilty white offenders to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. That's not a mob mentality. That is a fed up public who finally wants the law to be the law. Because right now the laws don't matter. Judges are allowed to substitute their own racial biases and personal prejudices in place of the law, and they get away with it. They're allowed to play favorites with who gets punished and who doesn't. The key word there being allowed. This farce only goes on as long as the public tolerates it. It doesn't do anything about it. And what we have seen this last week is a strong example of one instance of the public finally not allowing it, just this once. The U.S. has more people behind bars than any other country on earth. More than China, which has 6 times the U.S.'s population. More than Iran, which is supposed to be an oppressive, some sort of oppressive theocracy. More than Russia, which is supposed to be a wholly owned oligarchy, and more than North Korea, which is supposed to be a dictatorship. And yet the United States has more people behind bars than any of those countries. The white media hasn't given a damn about that, mainly because a disproportionate number of the people incarcerated in America are black. But now, all of a sudden, the white media is scared that judges are going to start locking people up left, right, and center. They're scared that the judges are going to adopt a zero tolerance policy because they're scared of losing their jobs. Now the white media is scared about that. Now you got millions behind bars without many of whom are there without reason. Now the white media is scared that folks are going to get locked up left, right, and center. The white media is scared that the judges will finally start to hand down hard prison time without consideration of whether or not the defendant is white. That's what they're scared of. I mean, where the hell has this white media been at for the last 150 years if they're so scared of people being thrown in prison without cause? Where's the white media been at? Every week we hear about yet another black man who has been in jail for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, their whole damn lives, even though they were innocent. Where was the white media at then? Where was Doris Cordell at then? Where have all of these white worrywarts been at then with all their fake sympathy? White media instead